Welcome to Pacific Mammal Research's Marine Mammal Highlight Series. We are a 501c3 research and education nonprofit studying marine mammals in the Salish Sea off Washington State. In this series, you will learn about different marine mammals as we discuss interesting facts about each species. This is our way to geek out, share some information, and have some fun. We hope you enjoy the series, and be sure to follow us on Instagram to vote for which animal we talk about next. And without further ado, welcome to the PacMam podcast. I'm Cindy.
And I'm Kat.
And this week, you may have noticed if you were waiting on bated breath to choose which marine mammal we were going to do this week. I kind of hinted to it last episode, where I was like, "Oh, we might just choose one," and it might be the Pacific white-sided dolphin, because that is one that we were very excited to see on our trip to Alaska. And actually, we were going through our list of marine mammal species that we have, so we know which ones we've done and which ones we haven't. And we were looking for it, and it wasn't on the list. And we're like, wait, what? And that was like the one animal we missed to have on the list. So we're like, well, that just seals the deal, and that's one we're doing. So sorry you didn't get
there you go.
We're doing the Pacific white-sided dolphin for those reasons. But I'm very excited about it because these guys are super cool, and a lot of similarities with porpoises in terms of not being researched as much as many other species. So we know a fair amount about them, but we still don't know a lot about them. And there's some cool research being done in our area, actually, on these dolphins. So, and they're beautiful. I mean,
they are very pretty. I do find it odd that there's not as much research done on these guys, given that, I mean, we'll talk about why that's maybe a little strange, but also makes sense, I guess, based on where they live and stuff. But yeah, but it's kind of interesting, where I feel like you think that that's often the animals that are really, really, really hard to find that don't have a lot of research done on them. And yet sometimes it's the ones that are in plain sight all the time that don't get the attention, like harbor porpoise. So,
and I think with these guys, it's kind of overwhelming, and we'll talk about why, because of the groups that they're in and stuff. So I can see being like, I can't.
Where do I start?
Exactly. Similar to what we were talking about in one of our other papers with Krista Huffman, or not, different last name, but with the dolphins down in New Zealand, the common dolphins. So it's a different difficulty with porpoises versus these dolphins, but very similar in the problems, but just different reasons why.
Mm-hmm. So with all of that intro, now you're like super excited to get to this episode,
right?
Yeah, let's dive in. Cool. All right. So let me start us off with talking about where we find these guys and what they look like. So Pacific white-sided dolphins are a pelagic dolphin species, meaning that they live out in the open ocean and near shore waters. So they're less likely to be found really, really close into shore. They typically live in the cooler temperate waters in the North Pacific Ocean. So for the US, that means kind of California, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska area. And there are some seasonal variations in where they are found on the west coast of the US, which I'll get into in just a moment. But in terms of the rest of the world, they're found in the southern Bering Sea, the Sea of Okhotsk, which again, like, I need to figure out how to actually say that name, because we say it a lot. And every time I say it, I'm like, I don't think I'm saying this correctly. The Sea of Japan, and the Yellow and East China Seas, which are found to the south of Japan. So kind of there's like a stretch basically across the northern Pacific Ocean. If you look at a map, it's basically like a top band.
It's like an eye mask.
There you go. That's what it looks like on the map. Exactly. And so in terms of on the west coast of North America, they are found typically November to April. They're kind of in the Southern California area. Around May, they kind of are starting to head north towards Oregon and Washington. And then beyond that, they can go all the way up to Alaska as well. So there is some belief that there is seasonal migration there. I'm not sure. Are you going to talk about that a little bit more? Or was that kind of it?
That specifically in my in that part. But it was unclear, because it says, in the summer, they may travel as far as Kodiak Island and the Aleutians. Whether these individuals are members of the local North Pacific stock or have migrated in from the California, Oregon, Washington stock is unclear. So like it's like they think they migrate, but yeah, you don't know if those are the same individuals or if it's so they don't really know what it is. I feel like you'd need to
Okay.
do either genetics or like photo ID saying, yeah, we saw this guy in California and now we saw that same guy in Alaska versus there being different communities that they're talking about.
Right. And just kind of jumping ahead a little bit to this status section, but there are three different stocks recognized in the US by NOAA. So there are two stocks off the coast of Washington, Oregon, and California, and then one North Pacific stock, which is found off the coast of Alaska. So just to kind of put that in context, they do, NOAA considers those three separate stocks. However, again, what is the level of intermixing and are those the same animals that are just moving? Oh, we don't know. So that's where they're found. In terms of what they look like, as Cindy said, if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see the picture that we have. They are very, very pretty with their colorations. So they are about 5.5 to 8 feet in length. So kind of a standard dolphin size. When you think of a dolphin, they're about that size. They weigh between 300 and 400 pounds. The males are generally larger than the females. And the Pacific white-sideds have a pretty robust body. They actually have a fairly short beak or snout. It's kind of it reminds me actually of dusky dolphins a little bit in terms of like how short that beak is.
It's like a little lips versus like an actual like beak because it's got the little delineation, but it's not very long. I always hate using them when I'm telling you the difference between a porpoise and a dolphin, and I generally use the Pacific white-sided because that's the only small dolphin we have here in the Salem Sea. And I'm like, okay, so there's the beak, but if you really want to think of a beak, think of a bottlenose dolphin. But you can see they still
Right.
have one compared to the porpoise. But yeah,
Doesn't illustrate our point very well, but
yeah,
they
but
do have a distinct beak, but it is shorter compared to a lot of other dolphin species. Their dorsal fin, however, is large compared to their overall body size and very curved. So that is one of the main identifying features of these guys. They have this very curved or falcate dorsal fin. Very
like
distinctive.
rounded. It's like it's not
Yeah.
pointy as much as other ones are.
Exactly. So in terms of their coloring, their back, tail, and lips are black, and their sides, dorsal fin, and flippers are gray, and then the belly is white. And then they also have a white or light gray stripe along the sides that extends from the eye to the tail. And I found that this is sometimes referred to as suspenders, which I think is awesome.
Ooh, I never heard that before.
I've never heard that before either. So they're a really, really beautiful dolphin species, again, with this black, white, and gray coloring. I feel like they're fairly distinctive looking. However, they might be confused with something like a common dolphin because of those large light colored flank patches, or Dahl's porpoise because of their splashy surfacing. So not necessarily because of the coloration, but because their ranges overlap and they surface in a kind of more rapid manner. I guess they can be mistaken for Dahl's porpoise if you don't really see the animal clearly through that splashing
Which
white
most of the time
of
you
the
don't with the
surfacing.
Dolphin porpoise, you just see the splash. So and I think we actually even were confused on that on our Alaska trip because they came in going crazy and we're like, oh, it's a Dolls, it's a Dolls porpoise, and then it actually showed up and we're like, oh, it's Pacific white-sided. Okay,
Kidding. Yeah.
just kidding. Once
Yeah.
I saw it, I was like, the splash was like, yeah. So
Yeah. And then the only other thing that I have for their appearance is that they do have 21 to 33 pairs of slightly pointed teeth. So again, dolphins have cone-shaped teeth, porpoises have spade-shaped teeth. And we will circle back to the teeth at the end when I have a little fun fact about their name. So keep that in mind and we'll come back.
There was a fun one name that I found, I'm sure you have, and I was like, wait, what? So there's some good ones. Yeah, so great. Yes, so they again, I personally think they're one of the most beautiful dolphins species that we have. I mean, it's just gorgeous. So my diet and behavior section here is I'm gonna actually have a little bit of it's not recent research, though still kind of recent. It's like 10 or 15, like 2010 was 15 years ago. Oh my god.
I feel old.
Yeah, I know, right? But some of it goes directly into the social structure part of it. So I wanted to bring it up there. But then I have some other newer research there. And sorry, there's a siren that went off and it was freaked me out for a second. Okay, so with their diet, these guys are opportunistic. They eat a variety of prey, so over 60 different species of fish and 20 species of cephalopods. So octopus and squid. So they're not picky. They'll eat whatever, which, as we've talked about many times before, is a good thing in the grand scheme of changing worlds. But a lot of the various types of squid, and then like capelin, anchovies, sardines, herring, those smaller forage fish that we've talked about quite a bit as well. Some of the craziest pictures that I've seen of Pacific whitesides, besides their other behaviors of jumping out of the water, which I'll talk about in a second, is their group foraging behavior. So they will, if you think about, if you've seen like anything on some of the like Planet Earth and things like that, oftentimes show dolphins corralling a bait ball, right? So the group has worked together and corralled these fish into a tighter and tighter ball. So the fish are just like into this tiny little ball, and then the dolphins take turns darting through and grabbing the fish. And so not that was necessarily Pacific whitesiders that you saw in that, but that is the behavior that they do. They often will feed in that grouping behavior, and it's just a really cool thing, and goes towards their, what I'll talk about in a minute, their sociality. That takes a high level of coordination between the individuals. To do that, to first of all just corral the fish, and second of all not to dart into each other.
Yeah, like who's going to go when? Yeah,
right. Because you don't want to just go that you could very much hurt yourself. So so there's lots of that goes into that. So it's a really neat behavior to see, and I've got to see it like one time in the Bahamas with spotted dolphins, but they don't do that as much. So I think it's a really neat behavior to be able to see. They can eat up to 20 pounds of food a day, which,
wow,
that's a lot of little fish, because these fish
that is a lot of little fish.
Small. And they're not huge animals either, like 300, 400 pounds. Like they're fairly svelte, so
they're living in cool water, I guess, so they probably have a higher metabolism,
and they're energetic, as we'll talk about. So they can dive up to 6 minutes to feed. And they mostly feed on mid-water concentrations of animals, so those animals in that deep scattering layer we've talked about before. And they've also seen feeding at dawn and dusk with gulls and on small surfacing balls of bait fish. So I think they just kind of eat whenever they want to.
Which makes sense, right? Especially if they are a little more opportunistic with their food preferences. Yeah. If something arises, like, cool, great, sounds good, I'll have a snack.
Yeah, like, oh, there's a big bait ball right there. I guess I'll just fill up now. I was gonna wait until second dinner, but I guess I'll eat now. So that's pretty much. I mean, there's not too. I didn't have too much specifics on diet. Their behavior. So they're very social. Put that out there right now. So I'm going to go into. There's two research, more recent research that I'm going to talk about here is Morton 2010, and these were. Shoot, I actually forgot where. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. They looked at 675 naturally marked dolphins. Oh, and this is in the Broughton Archipelago in Canada.
Okay, so we went through there, Cindy, on our trip.
Cool. These so there were 675 naturally marked dolphins that were photo identified, and this was actually fairly late. I didn't realize it was this early. It's 1984 to 1998. So
wow,
I thought the photo ID was more recent that they had done on the species, but this is an older paper or older data set. They had 214 that were resighted, a pair of dolphins that was photographed swimming in tandem 14 months apart, so over a year. Tight groups of 5 or fewer extensively scarred dolphins with extremely falcate dorsal fins were seen within every aggregation of over 50 animals, suggesting the existence of male-male associations. And if you've listened to some of our other podcasts, we talk about male alliances in certain species. That is a very common thing found in bottlenose dolphins and spotted dolphins. So they're like best friends for life kind of thing. And an important part of their social structure. So that was there. So then Erin Ash has done work, and I'll talk more about her work in the more recent research, but her master's thesis was also in this area in BC. And I don't actually where it was in relation to the Broughton Archipelago. This is the coastal waters of British Columbia. So
might have been a wider range then of where she was sampling from.
Yeah, but same area, right? We're in the Pacific along the Canadian coast. And so this one was for more recent, so that her thesis was in 2015, so kind of an updated thing for that. The study revealed new evidence for filipatry, so that means that the animals stay in the area. So we're talking about before, are they migrating down from California or are they staying in this area? That's different things. So new evidence for filipatry and sociality. Some individuals were recited over 19-year periods.
Wow, that's cool.
That's long-term site fidelity, right?
And
associated pairs more than a decade apart.
That's amazing.
Huge, right? Evidence was found for a high degree of sociality. She estimated how many calves there were, an average interbirth interval of 4.2 years. Approximately 3.9% of dolphins bore injuries from killer whales, but only 0.5 showed evidence of interactions with fishing gear and propellers. I know Kat will talk about the threats, and I will also, there's an updated paper from her about this, super interesting.
Oh, cool.
Later. But that is showing that, again, that's why with the seasonal movement, I was like, oh, I don't know about that seasonal movement, because like if these guys are showing 19-year site fidelity up here, they're probably not seasonally migrating. I mean, they could, but
at least maybe not that far though. Like again, and it would be interesting to know were those 19 years of site fidelity, were those studies conducted during the same season every year? Because again, if they're always returning to that season, that might actually, they might still be migrating, but they always come back to that location during that particular season. And that's why they're seen again there. So again, that kind of would need to go into a little more detail, but yeah, interesting. Very nuanced, it sounds like.
I didn't have time to read your whole thesis, so.
Understandable.
But either way, I think there is more nuance to, that it's, I don't think it's probably like, does everybody's in California, and then everybody migrates up here, and then everybody that, like there's some that they're hanging around. It seems like. So the overall arcing thing is, it's interesting because they say like high degree of sociality, like tight knit groups, but there's not a lot that I could find, at least on actual social structure, like, and because generally you do have to have photo ID for that, and that is difficult to do, and to have enough photos and interactions between individuals to do the analysis, even it can be difficult to tease apart. But from the behavior and whatever else is looked at, they look like they do have that high degree of sociality, and what the details of that are is probably yet to be seen. Gotcha. But they do, a couple places noted they have close-knit groups, and often will care for sick or injured other dolphins. So here's the group size is what we were alluding to before, with how difficult they can be to study and to do photo ID on. So our animals, our harbor porpoises, are hard because they're elusive and they don't love to have their picture taken, and but they're in small groups. So it's like, we get 3 and we had 3, wait, then we got the whole group. But these guys tend to be in groups of 10 to 100, and being in the hundreds is common, and probably the most common. It looks like the sea is frothing with dolphins, which we did not get to see in Alaska. I was
we kind of did. My husband and I kind of did, from our cabin actually, which was pretty. Nobody else saw it.
Yeah, just you as a special show just for you guys.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm not jealous about the side. But we actually just saw, the rest of us just saw kind of in a couple individuals, smaller groups. But they can be in groups of over 1,000. And do you want to guess what the largest group? I don't know if you read it.
Ooh, I didn't, but I want to guess. 30,000.
Oh wow! Well, you're going way high. No, it's 6,000.
Oh, yeah. Darn! I was like, oh, that'd be. I mean, can you imagine even like 6,000? I mean, like, that'll be so cool.
That would be so cool. As far as the eye can see, like you can walk across them. Like when they say you can.
Wow, 6,000 though. Wow, that's amazing.
So you can imagine trying to do photo ID on 6,000 animals. You're not going to get the whole group.
Good luck.
Yeah, and these guys they can be told apart by photo ID, but they aren't as easy as other species. So that's another reason that, like, we did that paper with the common dolphins done in New Zealand and the harbor porpoises. it's the idea of like ours are small, but not really well marked, in small groups. Theirs are not really well marked in groups of thousands. So there's two different ways that it's difficult, but also kind of the same because they're not distinctly marked. They get like real small mixing notches and there's coloration patterns that you can use, but it's just more difficult.
Right. You have to have like very good quality pictures
Yeah.
to identify those animals. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
and they're really fast. I mean, these guys are very fast moving and their surfacings are really quick. So again, splashy. So again, trying to get a really great picture of the flank and the fin of the animal, I could see would be very challenging.
Yeah. And especially if they're a group of like 1,000, they're just like,
yeah, there's like, water everywhere. Yeah.
And so they did say that there were all sex and ages in those groups, but they may be segregated, especially in those larger groups. They likely are. And then that other paper that had, a group of 5, it seemed like 5 males within that group of 50 that always were hanging out. So obviously there's some kind of segregation within that, but exactly what it is, we're not sure. As we alluded to, they are fast and acrobatic and playful. They are very common, leaping, flipping, somersaulting. They are fast swimmers. They will bow ride and wake ride. They are just like, life is great, and we're just rolling ourselves around the air. And there were some gorgeous photos of that group of Pacific white-sided that came in recently to the Salish Sea and were like right on shore, which is really weird. You said
very unusual.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people, we're going through what animals you'll see in the Salish Sea, and I'm like, okay, there's Pacific white-sided, but you're very much not likely going to see those from land. And then, of course, that happens. But there will always be those exceptions. But in general, they're just not really there. But they were leaping and doing so cool. The other cool thing about them is that they are often associated with other species, and in this area, particularly resident killer whales, which I thought was very interesting. Certainly don't want to be associated with the transient or big killer whales because they'll eat them. But the residents who eat fish, totally fine to play with. Also with stellar sea lions, Dall's porpoises, humpbacks, and those are all ones that you'll see them associated with in the inland waters. If you go to the outer waters on the coast, they are the most common one that I saw mentioned was the northern white whale dolphins.
Oh, wow.
Are you friends with those guys?
That's cool.
Yeah. I was like, maybe it's because their coloration is really cool too. So like they're like cool.
That's so intriguing. I mean, I don't know. Right?
They've also see them with Rizzo's dolphins, common dolphins, and pilot whales. So as we've talked about with some other species, ones that are very social, they don't see the boundaries of species. So they're just like social with everybody. Those were awesome. For reproduction, they're sexually mature, males at 10, females at 8 to 11. They have an average lifespan, most dolphins, about 40, 50 years. It's pretty common. They mate and give birth in the late spring to fall. So they kind of have a wider swath when it is. But in the central Pacific, the calves are born in late winter to spring. So I guess later it's warmer down there, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
I don't know. They're not really
interesting.
Waters, so
I mean, I guess if it's like down in California, that wouldn't be a problem. But I mean, if there's a resident northern population hanging out in like Alaskan waters, that seems like that would be an interesting time of year too.
Yeah. So yeah, and I don't think they do those ones up there. It's just the farther south.
Just the southern ones. Okay, that would make more sense.
Central. Their gestation is 9 to 12 months. They nurse up to 18 months. Anywhere I saw from like 6 to 18 months, and then the interbirth interval is around 3 to 4 years, which was again what Aaron had seen in the 4.2 years. So with that's what I have, and we're gonna take a quick break because my dogs are losing their minds. And we'll be right back. Hello, listeners. This is Cindy, the research director at Pacific Mammal Research, and I wanted to take just a minute to thank you for listening and supporting our work. And I wanted to see maybe if you wanted to learn a little bit more about the background of what we do and what we see in the field and other kind of cool information that you can get by subscribing to the podcast for only $5 a month. You can get ad-free episodes as well as these mini episodes where we discuss the things we've seen in the field, the stuff we've gone to with workshops, and other little interesting tidbits of information for our subscribers only. This is a great way to help support PacMam, who we are a very small nonprofit, so every dollar helps us continue the work that we do and provide the information and the fun podcast that we have that hopefully you guys are enjoying. So if you can, think about it, subscribe to the podcast. and help support our work, and we hope you enjoy. All right, we're back. There was nothing there. Dogs were barking at literally nothing, but it was really intense. I don't know why. But let's get into the threats and the status, and before we get to the new research.
Yeah. So in terms of status, these guys are protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, but they're not listed as threatened or endangered anywhere that I could find. So under the IUCN Red List, they are a species of least concern. In Canada, they're listed as a not at risk species. Interestingly, I couldn't find a good global estimate of Pacific white-sided dolphins that's recent. Like the only one that I found was basically for the 1990s, that they were estimated to be about 1 million individuals worldwide. But that's from the early 1990s. So I think it's interesting that they're not a species of least concern, and yet we really don't know what their global population is, which is interesting. So specifically around, oh, go ahead.
I wonder if it's because when you see them, it's like, well, there's 1,000 of them in that one group, so they
that's kind of what I was wondering. Yeah, and again, like it. Perception. Yeah, that's also what I'm wondering too. In the U.S., like I said earlier, there are 3 different stocks. There are 2 off the coast of Washington, Oregon, and California. And the population for those 2 stocks is around 21,000. That was from 2014. So again, 10 years old at the last survey, but again, fairly solid population number for those 2 stocks. And then the North Pacific stock off the coast of Alaska has an unknown population number. So again, we don't know where that one's. Again, that's a tougher area to do aerial surveys in, which is typically how they're conducting these population counts. So that might play into it.
I do have new research on their distribution in the eastern North Pacific.
Okay, that'll be it. Right. So that's So that's us. Yes, I always get that muddled up. And then in BC, always so confusing. And then in BC, there are an estimated 25,000 Pacific white-sided dolphins along the coast, and that was an estimate from 2007. So again, pretty old. So really, we don't have a good idea of what their global numbers are. They are currently assumed to be doing okay, but with that, we'll get into the threats and share why they might not be doing okay, and we should maybe actually pay a little more attention. I think you're right. I think it's just it's also really, really hard to get a population count when there are so many animals present in a group. It's very hard to count, even if you're doing aerial surveys and taking photographs. So I could see that would be a challenge too, of just like you have these groups up to thousands. How many are actually there though?
Yeah, and how many, if you take pictures, like, okay, I took a picture of this, but then how many overlapped if I move the picture over? You don't know where you're like, I got that animal, now the next one I'm going to go here.
Yeah.
You're not going to know that. And so how much are you overlapping? And then you got to do, I'm sure there's some fancy math, just like they do with the aerial surveys, where they're like, this is how many we missed because of this, this, and that. But still, yeah. It's I think after 100 or so, I'll be like, there's like 300.
There's a lot. Yeah. Plus, and this is kind of the challenge where sometimes it's easier to count animals that are fewer in number because you can tell that you counted it. Yeah. So I think that all plays into it. So getting into the threats, the number one, which is interesting that in papers, you were saying they had minimal evidence of entanglement, because this is actually one of the greatest threats to Pacific white-sided dolphins is high sea drift nets. So those are used by commercial fishermen, and the UN did prohibit high seas drift net fishing. And that is actually seen as one of the most significant attempts to conserve Pacific white-sided dolphins because they are at huge risk of bycatch with that particular fishery. And the US does require fisheries in the Pacific to have pingers or acoustic warning signals to prevent the dolphins from getting caught in the net. So basically to deter them from getting caught in the net, to help them understand that there is a net in front of them as well, to kind of indicate like, hey, there's something here, don't swim into it. Right. So this has helped to decrease the number caught by drift nets, but actually a number that I found from NOAA was there's an average of 5.9 Pacific white-sided dolphins still caught and killed annually. So not huge numbers, which is great, but that's just within the US.
5.9, like just 5 animals?
Individuals, yeah. So I think that's within the US. So I mean, that's obviously like come down drastically.
That's like nothing.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's a lot in due part to basically like, introducing these efforts to mitigate and reduce issues, and also to actually like just ban high seas drift net fishing.
So I think that's the difference. Is the one that I'll talk about is not high seas. So the location and what area you're talking about will have different.
Yeah. And that's the difficulty, right? Is that you can still do it in more coastal waters. So you're still going to have entanglement and bycatch happening not in particular areas. So this is an improvement. So I did find a couple of previous studies. So in 1993, Hobbs and Jones reported approximately 100,000 Pacific white-sided dolphins that were killed between 1970 and 1990 by high seas drift net fishing. So again, 100,000 down to 5.9 in at least the high seas area. That's huge improvement.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically, I mean, you're unlikely to get a zero entanglement rate.
Yeah.
The way fishing is. So if you're down to 5, like that's a
basically
sustainable
6
loss. Yeah. That's a sustainable loss in a population of 20,000, Yeah.
However, as you say, it's important to note that it's not banned everywhere. It's just banned in this one particular part of the ocean. So it is still a big threat. The other knock-on aspect of this is actually direct hunting and killing by humans. So because of their interactions with fisheries and the perceived negative effects or the actual negative impacts that they have on fisheries, humans do kill Pacific white-sided dolphins. So, the fishermen themselves will kill them sometimes because they are seen to be damaging the nets or going after their take. In parts of Japan, they are still hunted for meat. So there is an active take from humans still ongoing around the world. I couldn't get good numbers on how many were killed every year, but we know that they are.
Do you know if the one in Japan is like a dry fishery, like the dolphins?
I couldn't find anything that specifically said that it was. It just said they're hunted for their meat. So again, that might even be like, we're out fishing opportunistically. We saw some dolphins, let's kill them and grab them for meat and we'll take those home too. Like I couldn't get a good handle on how intentional that fishery was, but it did say specifically hunted for meat. So that's a different thing than killing them because they're in the way of your fishery.
Right. For sure.
Over and above that, we also know that these guys are prey, as Cindy mentioned, for the mammal-eating species. So they are one of the primary predators of Pacific white-sided dolphins, and they are also known prey for various species of shark as well. And then again, just as with a lot of marine mammal species that we've talked about, ocean noise is an ongoing concern for this species, particularly because of where they live in the northern Pacific waters. There's a lot of commercial shipping. There's a lot of industry that is moving into the waters as well. So again, like the greater the noise level, the greater that their communication and foraging, and therefore life history and lives are potentially at stake due to those direct and indirect impacts that we've talked about on many, many podcasts at this point. So if they can't hear the echolocation clicks that they're putting out, they can't figure out where they are, they can't hunt effectively, and then they also can't communicate. And these guys will use ultrasonic vocalizations as well. So again, those are harder to through noise. Like it's very hard to hear high frequency calls at the best of times, and very directional, and they attenuate very quickly in water, which means they don't travel very far. So if there's noise impeding that, you're going to lose that signal very quickly. So it is a concern for these guys.
It's like having the visual distance you can see underwater, where when it's like real cloudy or whatever, you got like you talk about scuba divers. There's a 1-foot visibility versus a 40-foot visibility. Vastly different in what you can do in the water at that time.
Yeah, your visibility is just your acoustic signals in this case.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what I have for the status and threats for these guys. So I want to hear about new research.
Yes. So I will start off with the one about the threats, because this was Aaron Ash's in 2021, looking at differentiating the natural and anthropogenic mortality that we see. Again, this is in this area in off the coast of BC. And so they said, with input from veterinary pathologists, so vets that look at dead things and figure out why they died, they looked at to distinguish between killer whale rake marks from scars and wounds that are likely to be caused by fishery interactions. Because sometimes they can be very easy to differentiate, and sometimes those scars, as they heal, can be much more difficult. So they examined photographs of 415 well-marked Pacific white-sided dolphins, for evidence of injuries and scars consistent with either killer whale or fishery interactions. In this case study, healed scars from interactions with killer whale predators were 8 times more common than scars from fishery interactions.
Cool. I mean, not cool, but
not cool,
like,
but yeah,
that's really neat that they can actually like tease it apart to that level.
And that humans aren't bigger than what their natural predators, right? Like that's a win, right? that's who should be winning this game, is the killer whales in that case. So they suggest that predation is a much bigger threat to Pacific white-sided dolphins in the study area than anthropogenic impacts, which is fantastic. Or that dolphins are much less likely to survive a fishery interaction than a predation attempt. So that's the other key,
right? So have to bear that in mind.
Yeah. So that was a very good asterisk to it. But that's the kind of data that we need to try to figure out, like, you know, are those numbers that you just said? Yeah, and it sounds like in combination with this and what you talked about, if there's only 6 that are dying, okay, there's a few maybe that they don't realize it died or whatever, but still, then it is likely that predation is more of an impact here than fisheries, and that's good. So those two,
that's a good thing.
Yeah, help us figure that out. I'm going to do one other sad thing before we move into other ones that aren't as sad. The Rosser et al. 2022 looked at calf-directed aggression and possible infanticide.
Interesting.
This is in Mutsu Bay, Japan, and they saw a 75-minute persistent attack by 10 individuals, 4 adult males, 1 possible male, and then 5 unknown sex. They flipped, they ran, they sandwiched, they submerged, they bit, and there were social-sexual behaviors. So
wow,
some of the males getting a little bit excited in the time. Likely, I mean, it's still unclear exactly, but could be a dominant display kind of thing. They left the neonate with visible injuries. You could see some of the faint fetal folds on the animal, so it was a young one. The assumed mother displayed protective behaviors and was the target of coercive guarding and sexual behaviors like mounting by the attackers. So there were also ones where so there was directed attacks at the calf, and then also as trying to get to the female, which is kind of indicative of an infanticide, like, let's get rid of the baby and then we're going to mate with you to be the father of the next one. After about, this is really interesting, is that usually it's one attack, like there's a group and they do it and then that's it. This one was after 50 minutes, a distinct new group of attackers came in. There was some overlap where 2 of the attacking groups merged, but only 2 of the original remained with the new group. So it really was like almost like a handoff, like, all right, we're done. Here you go, it's your turn.
Wow.
And the second attack was more intense, and this is where the one group, they split, and one group herded the mother and the other one was going after the calf.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so this group change during infanticide attempts was not previously known. I'd never heard of it before either. And if so, if this is an infanticide attempt, it provides insight into this dolphin social structure, which again we've talked about, but not a lot of. So,
wow, that's intense,
right? I was like, ooh, you know, and that kind of infanticide is not uncommon, but it's also not common. It's, you know,
it's not commonly observed either, especially in marine mammal species. It's fairly unusual for researchers to actually capture it and be able to write up what they observed.
Yeah, but there has been more in recent years as more people have been out, so it is, I think, more common than we previously thought it would be.
Yeah,
it's not rare. So I think that's the last kind of sad one I have. And the calf did survive. I mean, it was not dead, at least at the moment. Hopefully it did survive long term, but at least it survived the attack, which is good. Okay, so on the distribution in the eastern North Pacific, so our side of the Pacific Ocean, Waite and Sheldon in 2018 looked at that. They looked at the northern extent of the range includes Bristol Bay and 150-kilometer swath north of the Aleutian Island chain, but the presence in the Bering Sea is described as rare. They used a lot of different data, NMFS, so National Marine Fisheries Service data, platforms of opportunity, whaling and fishing records, naturalist reports and found year-round presence in the Bering Sea. Okay. So it's further north than they had expected. So presence in the Bering Sea is not rare. It occurs year-round, extends farther north than shown in current range maps, and site fidelity may occur in areas near and within Bristol Bay. So again, another section, Canada, they see site fidelity. Well, now they looks like they're seeing site fidelity in Alaska. So again, there's more to it than we previously. Okay, so moving on. So actually with that, I'm gonna go to another one about kind of range, and this is over in Japan, I believe. So this is Suzuki et al., not to be not the motorcycle brand, but just the last name of this person. In 2023, used genomics to show genetically isolated population in the Sea of Japan. So this is the west side, the western North Pacific.
Correct.
So they're morphologically different populations of Pacific white-sided dolphins that are observed sympatrically in the Sea of Japan. So they look kind of different from each other, but they're both there.
That's interesting.
Previously, limited mitochondrial and microsatellite DNA has failed to demonstrate distinct populations genetically, but they used genome-wide population genetic data using single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs. So a little bit more powerful test, I think, to look at this. Gathered in 2018 to 2021 from all domestic captive individuals in aquaria. They have them over there, the majority of which originated from the wild, as well as from stranded individuals covering a wide area of coastal water around Japan, 123 specimens. They determined that there were two genetically distinct populations with little interpopulation gene flow. And in addition, that genetic segregation matched up with the morphotype differences, right? So
gotcha. Okay.
You could have genetic differentiation and it not match up with what you're saying, like this animal is this based on what they look like. So they did match up. So they suggested that looking at a demographic analysis from an individual from each population indicated that sea level changes during the last glacial period probably led to allopatric, which means a population or species that is physically isolated from a similar group in the same area. So this allopatric divergence of the species in the limited area of Sea of Japan, with that group subsequently sharing a distribution area with the other population. So something happened in the last glacial period, separated these guys long enough that they became genetically distinct, but now they're still both in the same area, I guess, since the glacial receded.
And there's still no evidence of interbreeding at all.
No, it said no interpopulation breeding. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. Let's see. Then we're going to go back up to anatomy. This is by Sekia et al. 2024. It's a brand new. So I'm going to read this just because it's very anatomical, right? So if you don't know anatomy, but I just wanted to read it because it's fun. 4 muscles were inserted into the common tubercle: the brachiocephalicus, supraspinatus, and cranial part of the suprascapularis, which laterally rotated the common tubercle. Subsequently, the flipper swung forward and its radial edge was lifted. Conversely, the medial rotation of the common tubercle caused by the coracobrachialis and the caudal part of the subscapularis was accompanied by backward swing of the flipper and lowering of the radial edge. Right? Got it? Sure.
That made absolutely zero sense.
I'm sure it makes perfect sense to an anatomy person. I mean, I even taught human anatomy, and it's like so I know some of those words, but I'm just still like I can't remember.
That's like something that you bust out in an elevator to just look really smart. Yeah, you're like, exactly. Yes, I know what these words mean. Absolutely.
But the main thing I was going to share with you on that one is these findings suggest that the function of the flipper as a stabilizer or rudder is caused by the rotation of the humerus's common tubercle. Okay. So we know that it's used as, we know that flippers are used as stabilizers and churning and stuff like that, but specifically for these guys, it's because of that rotation of the common tubercle. Yay.
There you go. All right.
I'm sure it's very important information to know, but kind of like very specific and very kind of random. Okay, so I'm just going through which ones I've already done. Okay, so I got 2 more real quick. This is by Mishma et al. 2019. Pulse calls as contact calls. So these pulse calls are those ones that are like really difficult. They're not frequency modulated whistles, and they're not echolocation. They're both
middle,
very hard. But these group living species appear to exchange contact calls to maintain group cohesion. They recorded 2 females at the Osaka Aquarium and 3 females at this other Itsumitu Sea Paradise. So these are all captive. They produced pulse calls consecutively, a pulse call sequence that was defined as 3 or more successive pulse calls within a very short time frame. And then they looked at those, and they increased during separation periods and decreased during reunions, and were used for vocal exchange, suggesting that they are contact calls for the white-sided. They also, there was type, they categorized into different type, and then sometimes they were matched by the individuals, and then sometimes they weren't. So basically, they're saying that the results suggest the sequence type may function as an individual and or group identity.
So interesting. Okay.
Yeah, kind of like
cool.
dialects we're talking about with killer whales. Maybe not to that level, but like that specific call is specifically for that individual or group.
Interesting.
So kind of cool. Some
super
neat things, yeah, you can find from this stuff. And the last one I have is related to those pulse calls again. Kanes, K-A-N-E-S, et al. 2024. These are near Barkley Canyon, and this is off in Canada. Seasonal and diel patterns in pulse calls. So they detected 480 days of near continuous passive acoustic data collected over 20 months from Barkley Canyon node of the Ocean Network's Canada's Neptune Observatory off Vancouver.
Cool.
Yeah. Pacific white-sideds were found to be vocally active during all diel periods year-round, with high summer and low spring activity. Seasonal dependent diel patterns were identified, with Pacific white-sided dolphin pulse calls exhibiting no diel pattern in spring, a slight increase in vocal activity during dusk and night, which may go to that feeding behavior, possibly if they're using it for that, and a notable increase during night and dawn in summer.
Okay.
So not sure exactly what that all means, but there are specific seasonal variations in when they hear these pulse calls, which if they're using them for contact, let's see, low spring, high summer. So maybe that's when, babies are born. So moms are like, get here.
Right.
Or other kind of social aspect of it might be higher in that time of year than others, or if they're seasonally moving at all, like that has something to do with
interesting.
Yeah, but yeah, so there's some cool stuff going on, and a lot of it here in the Pacific over here, which is kind of cool, learning more about these guys. That's what I have for these super cool dolphins. So let's get to the names, because there's some fun.
Yeah, so let's start off with their Latin name. So their Latin is Lagenorhynchus obliquidens. And so this is kind of funny because, again, as we said up top, they have a pretty short beak, but they are part of the Lagenorhynchus grouping, meaning that that means bottlenose. So Lagenorhynchus itself, the word means bottlenose, and then that species obliquidens means slanting teeth.
Ooh.
Which I find fascinating.
So first of all, bottlenose, like, why aren't the bottlenose dolphins named Lags?
I know. There you go. That's a great question, and I do not know.
and just with that, you may often hear times they'll say, "Oh, there are lags." They will just shorten it.
Yeah. So that's one of their common names, which I'll get to in a second. But yeah, I thought the second part, that species name, was interesting. Slanting teeth. Where I'm like, I mean, do they have more like slanting inward than other dolphin species? I couldn't actually find anything on that anywhere else, but
So what's interesting is that when I was looking at the diet stuff, most of the time they don't talk about how many teeth the animals have, unless it's something specific like a beaked whale, where it's like they have 2 teeth. But they almost all of them specifically talked about how many teeth they have, and that they were specifically for grasping prey and doing it head first, which all dolphins do. But I find it interesting that they are specifically saying that for that animal. So I wonder if it has to do with that slanting, like, is a bit
right. If it curves inwards a little bit, it could hold on to the animal and you could kind of like choke it back. Yeah. Good question.
Yeah.
Some fun common names that they are known as well as Pacific white-sided dolphins. Hookfin dolphin, for obvious reasons, right? As we talked about, their fin is very curved.
Yeah, but do you have another hookfin version of
that? No, I just had hookfin and then white-striped dolphin.
Yeah, no.
And lags.
I saw hookfin porpoise.
Oh, Oh, okay. Well, see, this is the thing. So dolphins and porpoises used to all be referred to as porpoises, so it gets real confusing real fast.
Yep. I was like, I hope that's just part of that, and not that they like thought this was anything like a porpoise. But yeah,
I mean, yeah,
it's
probably
like
just
when all dolphins
I
were
kind of,
called porpoises. Yeah. I mean,
yeah. So yeah,
dolphins used to be the bottlenose porpoise.
bottlenose porpoise, exactly. So
Yeah.
just to make things confusing. So yeah,
Yeah.
hookfin dolphin, apparently hookfin porpoise, white striped dolphin because of that light gray or white stripe that runs along the sides, not to be confused with the striped dolphin, which is in fact a different species. And then yeah, again, a lot of times within the research community, they're just known as lags up here, especially. That's kind of the common parlance.
If you know them well, like you're good buddies with them, you call them lags, you know.
Yeah, we're tight.
We're tight. Even though I just met them in Alaska.
So yeah, some fun additional names and kind of a cool Latin name. It's always nice when the Latin name actually like has meaning versus just like they're found in Australia, so it's Australis.
Yes.
Well, like that's less exciting. So
well, and obliquidans, it just sounds cool anyway.
I know. So yeah, there you go.
Cool. Well, that I think is it then for the Pacific white-sided dolphin. I'm very excited to do this one because it's one of my favorite, honestly, one of my favorite dolphins because they're just so beautiful and just lots of cool stuff about them. So hope you enjoyed it. And if you're watching this on YouTube, the picture that is below you is a picture that I took on the trip. That was I really wanted to get a good picture of a Pacific white-sided dolphin, and I got one like I think it was like the last
the very last night. Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I got it. And it was just the one animal we saw. But anyway, that's came from our trip to Alaska, which is very cool. So with next time, we do have a article picked out. I can't remember what it is now because it's been like 2 or 3 weeks since I picked it out. But we do have one, and it's going to be super cool. We'll talk about next week. And remember, always, of course, if you have anything you want us to talk about, please reach out on the socials or in email. We'd love to chat with whatever you want us to talk about. I mean, marine mammal related. Has to be at least something connected.
we have to stay within our scope of right. Expertise here.
Exactly. And don't forget to check out our website and our merch store, and we will hopefully be having some new logos and merch stuff for their 10-year anniversary. And if you feel like it, please donate and or share with others, because that's how we can continue to bring you this fun podcast and the research that
you can also become a podcast subscriber too. So if you do enjoy the podcast and you want to make sure that you get it regularly and support us as you listen, definitely check out that option too.
Yeah, it's a great one. With that, we will let you go, and we will talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye.
This was brought to you by Pacific Mammal Research, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. To learn more about the species we discuss, check out our blog. Head to our website, www.pacmam.org, that's PACMAM.org, to check it out. Also, help us continue providing fun and educational content like this by donating today. Your help is how we can continue to do our work and share it with you. Thanks.